Welcome to another edition of the Best Business Minds, where we interview business leaders and academics that write thought-provoking books. I'm Marc Kramer, serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs. And currently, I'm teaching entrepreneurship at Vinh University in Hanoi, Vietnam. Today, please welcome our guest, Mandy Schaniel. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
You're so close. Schaniel. It's
Schaniel.
difficult. Thank you.
Thank you very much for making sure I pronounced this correctly. And she's the author of the book, Faith Over Fear, How to Adopt a Successful Mindset, which I love the book. And I love the concept because I'm teaching that every day here at Vinh University. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's start off with Mandy, you telling us about your professional background and how you got to the point where you're at right now.
Sure, absolutely. So I spent a little over a decade as a startup executive in the recruitment technology space. So I was a very early executive at ZipRecruiter.com, built out customer success and account management there, which was a wild and exciting ride, very fun. And kind of hopped around a little bit into background checks and the trucking niche side of things. And I decided after some time to start my own consulting business. I'm a wife and a mom of 3 kids. And when I go in on something, when I am committed to a project or a company, I go all in. So part of my idea behind starting my own consulting business was to have a little bit more control over work-life balance, pull myself back a little bit and make sure I was spending enough time with family. And then I had the opportunity to retire, or we could call it a hiatus, because I am addicted to startups, so we know that's probably not going to stick. And really focus on my purpose and fulfillment. And so I spent a lot of time digging deep to think about, in addition to solving problems with my clients and mentoring others, what could I do that would allow me to keep that work-life balance, but help other people? That's really what everything comes down to for me, is how can I help the most people and maintain that work-life balance? And that was when I realized I had put a dream on a back mental shelf for years, where I'd always wanted to write a book. And so I devoted about a year to writing my first book, Faith Over Fear, in hopes that I could, with a one-to-many approach, mentor other people, share, what I've learned in my experience over the past decade plus, and try to help other people to find success, figure out how to not necessarily eliminate, but reduce stress, and have a more positive outlook when it comes to chasing their goals and their dreams.
Yeah, stress is a huge factor today and only getting worse every day,
Absolutely.
because we're competing on a global basis. And the world is upside down in many places around the world. So it's just that much more stressful.
Yeah.
In your journey to cultivate a positive mindset and strong relationships, what specific strategies or practices do you employ to ensure that you consistently choose to see the good in challenging situations, which we were talking about before everybody came on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of it is, number one, I always strive to look below the surface level. If someone, whether you're driving in a car and someone cuts you off, or there's a challenging situation, challenging personality, I try not to take any of that at face value, and I try to think, oh, what must be going on in their day that's causing this, right? When you're driving in a car, there's not much opportunity or room to build a relationship, but makes no sense to me to be mad about it, right? Oh, they might be in a hurry. I hope everything's okay. So I try to focus on my reaction to it. And when it comes to developing relationships, it's always that opportunity of, okay, I don't like how they said that or how they behaved. Why did I react that way? And what might be going on that's causing that? If you look for the deeper understanding of what's going on in someone else's life, you can get past a lot of those challenges and start to think more positively, because chances are there's an opportunity that you can help, and there's an opportunity you can connect on something that maybe they hadn't shared that's going on in their life.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense and takes a lot of the stress out of it. And so you don't drive yourself insane
Right.
because of these kinds of issues, especially now that so many people are weaponized in the United States in particular. Having that attitude probably is going to also could save your life, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, it's
Uh,
kind of like defensive driving, right?
yeah, yeah,
You're not gonna go on
for
the
sure.
offensive. Yeah.
But there's really no upside to thinking about it in another way. I mean, you can only get yourself in trouble by all of a sudden deciding that you're going to go on the offensive with whatever this person has done.
Right.
There's not going to be a good outcome.
Right, and it's not about being a doormat either, but, meeting, let's call it aggression, with aggression is not going to diffuse the situation, right? It's not going to settle things. And for me personally, I've done this, I've learned from this mistake. When someone is behaving in a not so kind manner, it doesn't make sense to me. So instead of spending time trying to run it through my brain to be like, I don't get why people behave this way, that's a waste of my energy. Instead, if I can see the opportunity to help, or walk away from it and know maybe I made an impression, and if not, my hands are clean. I walked away being the person I know that I am.
Can you share an example of how you've applied the lesson of seeking to understand others in a different context, possibly outside of work or family, and what impact it had on the outcome of that situation?
Sure, sure. Gosh, there are a lot of examples. Um, I do have a work one. So there, the company will remain nameless. I had a colleague who was actually a level above me, so they were senior to me, who, when I was new to the company, I tried to partner with this person to make sure my team wasn't making their team's life more difficult. Tried to develop relationships with their team. For whatever reason, this individual took that in a negative way. Now, I had learned uh, over the years in my career before that sometimes the way I communicate, even though I'm always trying to help, there's certain personalities that had been intimidated by me, which was never my intention. So I would always make it a point to be aware and address it if I feel like someone's taking me the wrong way, and to have a clear line of communication. This individual took everything I said the wrong way. So I tried really hard to have conversations with that person to clear it up. Um, this person did not want to budge. There are times where it just doesn't work, right? I know I did everything that I could to resolve that, but that person wasn't going to get past whatever their territorial issues were, despite the fact that I was trying to help. So I kind of had to wash my hands of it. Now I've had many other situations where, I have had, a rough go with one of my kids' teachers, and and tried to figure out why, they had this attitude. I had a teacher that both of my older kids had, and it was a vastly different experience between my daughter and my son. Um, and I was trying to figure that out. And I was able to see beyond what happened, because in the midst of that was the pandemic. And this particular teacher was very, very affected emotionally by the quarantine and the pandemic and all the changes that teachers had to go through. So that really helped me to understand kind of where she was coming from a bit more, because Mama Bear was ready to come out, because she was being very hard on my child. And we were able to work through it, because I was able to have some sensitivity despite not liking her approach. I was able to put that sensitivity of, this has been a really tough transition for all teachers, but this teacher in particular. So let me not take everything to heart and work with her as best as I can. And we were able to make it work and smooth things out.
Now, before everybody got on, I found out that your husband's a professional poker player. And is there things you've learned from him related to what you're talking about here that's been helpful to you?
I mean, he definitely is phenomenal at reading people. We joke sometimes that I might be the most difficult person for him to read sometimes. Um, but I think we've taught each other. I mean, we've been together for over 20 years. So we've learned a lot together over that time on how to read people. We talk about these things all the time. So absolutely, it has helped me in a variety of circumstances in work outside of it to learn how to read people. And it's different in a poker setting versus a work setting, but there are a lot of similarities that help you to, again, look beyond the surface and try to understand where someone's coming from.
You mentioned the importance of adopting student mindset and continuously seeking growth. Can you elaborate on specific instance where embracing this mindset led to a significant breakthrough in your personal or even professional relationship?
Absolutely. I mean, I can't, to be honest, I can't think of a situation where adopting a student mindset didn't have a fantastic impact. It started for me. The first time I learned that phrase was when I was in high school, and I joined the water polo team. The second year they had women's water polo at my high school at the time, and was like, I don't know what to do. And my coach just said, adopt a student mindset, learn the game. I said, okay. And I did that. And I was on varsity as a freshman, because I learned about the game and I was always asking questions. And that was fantastic. It's been true in every job that I've had. Specifically, I will say, moving from the job advertising side of recruitment technology to background checks, same general area, right? We're talking hiring, vastly different, when you're talking about regulations and things. When I joined the team at Accurate Background, they said, look, you know, we expect anyone who's not from background checks to take at least 6 months to ramp up because you have to learn all of the regulations. My team was managing all of our enterprise accounts. So there's a lot to learn. And I said, that sounds like a challenge to me. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to study up. I'm going to be a student of everything we're doing. I'm going to talk to any and everyone in the organization that I can and do my own research. And was very pleased when our head of sales, who had been there for a long time, said, you know some stuff that I don't know. I've never seen anybody ramp up quite so fast. I'm like, well, it's because I needed to be a student of what we're doing and I need to understand it so we can support our customers. So every time you take that, student mindset in anything you're doing, whether it's, your health, your fitness, your work, your children, whatever it is that you're doing, there's going to be tremendous benefits.
I'm 63 and I'm a serial entrepreneur and educator, an educator for 22 years. When I walk into the classroom or I deal with my students, I feel like they can teach me as much as I can teach them.
Yes.
And I don't even think twice about the age difference at all. Like I'll
Right.
ask them questions or ask for their perspective, or I taught this class and I'll ask them, how did you think it went? Is there something I could have done better in this? So I don't assume that I have all the answers. And
Right.
I think that opens my mind up to all the other possibilities.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's a ton of side benefits to that as well. I agree with you. I think we can learn from everybody, regardless of age or experience or everyone. That's the beautiful thing about diversity, right? And diversity of thought is everyone comes from a different background, sees things differently, has a different perspective. But you're also teaching them when you ask those questions sincerely that they have a voice and they have worth and there's value in what they think, and that's a phenomenal thing.
In your experience, how can individuals best balance the need for self-reflection, which is incredibly important, and clarity with pressures of daily responsibilities and commitments, especially when they feel stuck or in a rut?
Yeah, it can be hard, and I talk about this a bit in the book, of course. And there's, depending on how much time you're spending in self-reflection. A lot of times, if you're feeling a lot of pressures about your life, your job, your commitments, whatever they may be, and feeling stuck in a rut, you might not be spending a lot of time on self-reflection. So it can be jarring to start, especially when you start to analyze your inner self-talk. It can be jarring to realize how negative it can be. But the important thing is to start small, make a commitment to it. Think of it as self-care, right? 10 minutes a day of quiet. We can all 5 minutes, depending on how busy you are, set a time. This is, and I'm sure we'll get into micro tasks as well. But find a commitment that you can make that is so ridiculously small. It makes you want to go, there's no way that I'm going to get anything out of this. There's also no way that if I commit to it, I can come up with any excuse not to do it. That's the key, right? Is it's like, okay, 5 minutes, fine. And sit and think and take time to take stock of how you reacted to the day. How are you feeling? Our feelings, and I know this is a lot very fluffy for a lot of people, but our feelings do have a massive impact on our bodies and our health. Because when you are feeling stressed, your blood pressure rises, your heart beats fast, right? Like there are physiological responses to how you feel. So taking stock of that and learning how to control and unwind and de-stress is really, really important. But taking that time to do it, whether it's meditation, thinking about the day, thinking about what did I learn today? Try to keep it positive. What could I have done better? That's a positive, right? While admitting there's always room for improvement. What did I learn from today? And how can I go into the next day, the next situation, and not bring as much stress with me? Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%, absolutely. Um, in chapter 2, talk about managing challenges, and you discuss the importance of identifying deeper whys behind our goals to help when challenges arise. Can you share specific strategy or a technique you use to remind yourself the whys during a particularly difficult time?
Yeah, absolutely. The I like to draw on this example. So let's say for for example, that your goal, right? So when we're talking about a deeper why, let's think about the goal that we have attached to it, because the two go together. Let's say your goal is to make, just for round numbers, we'll say $100,000 a year. Okay. That seems simple enough. That seems cut and dry. My goal is to maybe you're making $50,000 a year and you want to get to 100K. Seems like a very cut and dry goal. Why would you need a deeper why? Well, that's a fairly decent gap, right? It's going to take some time to get there. And no matter what the goal is, whether it's, financially related, work related, health, relationship, whatever the goal is, there are going to be challenges on the path to achieving that goal. Like that is universal. Name me a time you didn't go after a goal and there wasn't some hitch, some challenge, some roadblock that you faced, whether that's internal or external. So you have to develop a deeper why, because that's going to fortify your discipline and your strength to continue moving forward. So if you're pursuing that financial goal, and the only reason you're pursuing it is, I want to make more money, and you haven't thought deeper beyond that, and you come across a challenge, it's a little bit easier to give up. When you start to think of a deeper why, what kind of ripple effect will it have? Who will it affect in my life? Do you have a spouse or children or people that you will be able to help when you achieve that goal? What are those reasons behind it? When you start to build out that why and start to see that it affects people in your sphere of influence, it's building this accountability net, and it makes it so much more difficult for you to back away and to give up when things get difficult. So it's really a way of fortifying that discipline to keep going forward when times get difficult. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh, Impact on others. You emphasize the ripple effect of personal achievement and how they can inspire those around us. Can you share an example from your life where your success positively influenced someone else and how that motivated you to pursue your goals further?
Gosh, yeah, there are a lot of examples. Let's see. I partly because I like to take stock of those opportunities and share in the wins. So you know, I I guess we'll start here. Each time that I have left a position, a job for another job, typically I was recruited away, which in and of itself was a, successful mission for me, right? To feel that um, pull to be wanted from another company, a higher role, et cetera. I always made it a point to create a plan for my backfill, for who was going to step into my shoes when I left, and work with individuals that had the potential to be promoted into that role. And I've been able to do so successfully with a number of different people who, you know, if we talked about it a year or two before that happened, they didn't think that they would be ready. But we were able to work together. I was able to mentor them before, during, and after. And I've stayed in close contact with most of them to make sure they felt prepared and supported to take on that new role. So, I see that as a positive ripple effect, being able to help them grow in their careers. I have a really funny story for you, actually. You probably wouldn't expect this. There was a woman on one of my teams at one point, very smart, very capable of the job, was not executing well. And we would sit down, we'd have one-on-ones, and we try to figure it out. I'm like, this. What's
Mhm.
going on? Why are these mistakes happening? Let me get to know you better. And what I learned, we worked on it. I learned she had a completely different passion. And eventually, we worked through the proper HR process, et cetera. I had to let her go. And we had a heart to heart. That is the only time I've had to fire someone and uh, feel really good about it because she
Well, you
thanked me.
probably did her a big favor.
She thanked me, and you know what she went on to do? She went on to pursue her passion and started her own business in baking. And we kept in touch, and I was like, okay. Like, we worked through the issue. She wasn't left, it just wasn't a fit. She could do the job, but it wasn't her passion. And so that, I pride myself on trying to be the best leader that I can for each individual that I work with. That was a success, right? Which sounds funny. I fired her. But it was a success because it moved her into something she was really passionate about and was able to be successful in doing.
Oh, I'm 100% behind that. I've had to do that a few times in my career where I realized that they're drowning and it's not their fault that they're drowning. They're just put in the wrong position.
Right.
And I tell them we can either see if there's another position that's right for you in the organization, or I help you through my contacts find a better situation that will
Exactly.
allow you to flourish. The only time I fire somebody is if they're really not giving effort. If they're
Right.
giving effort, then I just try to figure out how to make that work. But if they're not giving effort, well, then that's on them at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think your way of looking at it is definitely the right way. Um, Meditation practice. It's hard for me to meditate. I don't have the patience for it. But you mentioned the benefits of meditation and maintaining a positive mindset and overcoming negative thoughts. What adjustments did you make to your own meditation practice over time to better suit your personal needs and enhances your effectiveness in reaching your goals? And I think from reading the book, you're like a super A personality.
Thank you. I think it's meditation is, for me, it's all, that inner self-talk, affirmations, prayer. For me, it's all kind of combined into one, right? And so whatever is going on, in my life in the current moment, anything that can come across as negative, I try to flip it into a positive affirmation, right? And so a lot of the time when I'm meditating, I'm praying or I'm flipping a negative on its head, to refocus, to rebalance, to take that time to center. If things feel stressed out and crazy, you take stock of all the things you're grateful for and you start to feel really silly for what you're stressed out about, right? Doesn't matter what's going on in your life. If you can sit there and go, I'm grateful I have a roof over my head. I'm grateful I have clothes to keep me warm. I'm great. You know what I mean? You start to list all of those little things that we take for granted every day. The things that stress us out start to sound silly, right? Because there's so much. I'm breathing. I have water, right? Like there's so much to focus on. So for me, it's that time to quiet when my brain doesn't want to slow down. I don't know if you've ever tried yin yoga. So there's a practice where you, especially if your brain likes to go, 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 you start at the top of your head and you focus on one body part at a time, just relaxing, just relaxing. Eventually, your brain will slow down to some extent. It'll interrupt you sometimes. And you're like, why am I thinking about what's for dinner tomorrow while I'm relaxing my right hand? But it happens because a lot of times we're go, 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 and you get right back focused, focus on your breathing, focus on your affirmations. And there are some days where meditation is more about repeating your affirmations, focusing on your breathing. Um, and that's it. There are other times you can really kind of sink into it and feel calm and at peace and quiet your mind. Um, but there's no sense in being hard on yourself when you can't quiet your mind. It's totally normal. It's totally normal.
Yeah, I think people have a very difficult time of doing that. Handling self-doubt. In the chapter, you highlight how self-talk can be detrimental to achieving our goals. What specific affirmations or techniques have you found that most effective in silencing negative self-talk and fostering a more constructive inner dialogue? So explain more about what self-talk is.
Absolutely. So, like we were talking about before, when you take that time for self-reflection every day, I think a very valuable piece of that time should be just listening to your inner thoughts. And this is where if you're not in the practice of doing that, it can be really discouraging and really jarring because you don't realize maybe when you pass the mirror, you criticize something about your physical appearance. Maybe you make a mistake and you call yourself an idiot. Maybe, you know what I mean? There's so many things that happen during the course of a day that if you're not paying attention to the thoughts that come in your mind, um, you miss it. And when you do start to pay attention, you're like, oh my gosh. The thing that I always tell people is don't let it overwhelm you, because these are habits. These are habits you've created that you haven't been paying attention to. They're happening on a subconscious level. Um, but if you wouldn't let somebody else speak to you that way, don't speak to yourself that way, right? And it's really hard to break those habits. So I just flip them. I just flip them, or I kind of mentally, like, etch a sketch board, try to mentally
Yeah.
shake it and erase it, right? You're like, nope, we're not doing that today. If it's the mirror for you and you have a negative comment or thought about something about your physical appearance, flip it, find something positive. Right? You drop something, laugh about it and say, oh, not that big of a deal. Don't call yourself an idiot. Right? And so there's also, one of the most constant affirmations that I have is I am grateful. Right? So no matter what is going on in my life, no matter, I might be struggling to lose some pounds. I know I'm doing all the right things. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for my health. We're moving in the right direction. But it's always about flipping it to the positive. So it can be alarming. And when you doubt yourself, again, it's like shake that etch a sketch board. No, I believe I can do this. And if you're someone who is detail oriented, what do I need to learn to accomplish this? Okay, let's start here. Let's focus on that. How do we be a student of what we need to learn and how we need to move forward? Great. You are in control. Like we were talking about before, life and circumstances happen whether we're actively participating or not. So why not do what you can from a positive perspective to try to get to that point you want to get to? There's no point in doubting yourself. It's not going to help you move forward. It's just going to make you feel bad, right? So find the things you can have faith in yourself for, build the areas where you need to improve, and keep going.
You emphasize the importance of viewing failure as an opportunity for growth, which anybody over the age of 40 has been hearing that their whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share a specific failure that has significant impact on your personal, professional life and what you learned from it?
Absolutely. We talked about this before. I have trouble categorizing failures in my brain because I've learned to learn from them. And so that's how I view them in my head. But there is one instance that taught me a lot about leadership and a lot about how I react to failure. So in the early days at ZipRecruiter, we were building out a brand new product. And as you do, uh, you don't have everything figured out. There's some manual intervention involved to make the technology work. And so at the time, our CTO and I were taking turns doing some manual work to pace out clients' budgets on the weekend when no one was, manning the computers. And it was my weekend. And I happened to miss this one client, and they spent $20,000 in clicks in a day, which was half of their monthly budget on a on a Sunday because just our emails went insane. And I was like, oh crap. Oh no. So I called the CEO and I said, this is totally my fault. I don't know how I missed it. Wasn't expecting that on a Sunday. Very abnormal for us on a Sunday. Like it shouldn't have happened. But
Right.
nonetheless, it was my responsibility. So I said, look, I own it. I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh, but we can't charge the client for that. So we're gonna have to give them free money. And he was like, I was terrified at what his response was going to be. I had only been there, I think, for about a month. And I'd had so many successes at that point. We were doing really well, but I was like, oh no, what's going to happen? And he said, Mandy, you're going to have to start making bigger mistakes so that I can warrant the developer's time to automate this for you. So I'm glad that this happened because now I can make sure we have a developer that goes and fixes that because you shouldn't have to do this on a weekend. And I was like, oh my goodness.
Well, he or she sounds like a good boss to work for
He was
and a good
great.
role model.
He was great. And it taught me a lot about leadership and something that I took with me as I built my teams there and everywhere I went, which was number one, I lead by example. I will always fall on the sword. If I make a mistake, I'm going to own it. I'm not going to pass it off on anybody else. And I expect my teams to do the same. And when someone falls on the sword, I guess going with that metaphor, you don't jam it in further. You help them out of the situation and you respect the fact that they were willing to take responsibility. And I always use that story with people because I had many opportunities as we were building the products and I was building teams where similar situations happen. I'm like, let me tell you a story. And we'll use this as an example. These mistakes happen and it helps us to understand we need to devote the resources to solving this without humans, because that's what we needed at the time. So yeah, there's always an opportunity
Um,
to learn.
in chapter 4, you emphasize the importance of micro goals for motivation and progress. How do you suggest individuals determine the most effective micro goals for their unique situations, especially if they feel overwhelmed by their ultimate goal? And can you explain what a micro goal is?
Absolutely. So, like I mentioned earlier, a micro goal is something that you you commit to doing daily, but the daily commitment of it is incredibly minimal. So maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes on this particular task. So really micro tasks, right? So for example, when I decided I wanted to write the book, I was like, how do you go from an idea to a whole book? Like it was, it was mind-boggling. It felt like a lot. And so I had actually learned the strategy of micro tasks through, I don't, if anyone's familiar with 75 Hard by Andy Frisella. I had done 75 Hard and the Live Hard year-long program, and micro tasks are part of that. And so I learned how effective they were. So when I sat down to write the book, so again, this can apply to any goal that you have. I said, okay, what do I need to do to get that done? Well, obviously I need to write, right? So whatever your goal is, what are things that you can do every day, minimal amount per day, that will move the needle in the right direction towards achieving that goal? So for me, it was writing. And so I committed to 15 minutes of writing every day. 15 minutes, I could check it off the list and be done for the day. That sounds ridiculous, right? And I laughed about it. I'm like, I'll get this book written in the next century. All right. Um, I finished the book in less than a year. And part of it is because what happens, you release all the happy brain chemicals when you check something off a list. Doesn't matter that you spent 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever you commit to doing it, doesn't matter how big or small it is. It matters that you check it off the list. You have that sense of success and completion, and you release serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, and those are things that feel good. They encourage you to continue repeating that task so you get that positive feedback, and they really strengthen your discipline and your motivation. So, and again, it doesn't mean that you only spend that allotted time. And what happened with me with the book is there were many, many, many times where I spent significantly more than 15 minutes writing, right? But the days that I just didn't feel like doing it, I spent my 15 minutes, I crossed it off and I moved on. And I still got it done. I still got all the happy brain chemicals. Um, but I didn't feel like it was too much and I could never come up with an excuse not to do it.
In your experience, what are some of the common misconceptions people have about setting micro goals and how can they avoid these pitfalls to better maintain the momentum towards their larger objective. And I think you talked a lot about that just now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think the biggest thing, which is I tend to be a sarcastic person. It's kind of a fun experience to go, this is definitely not going to move the needle.
Mhm.
How can, you know, 15 minutes of this lead to me accomplishing this big goal? So I challenge people, especially if you have a sarcastic bent to your personality, to go for it and try to prove me wrong. I'd love to hear from you because everybody that I've talked to and advised to start with micro tasks and micro goals, has fallen in love with it because it is, in my experience, the fastest, easiest way to develop habits and discipline. And it's a game changer. Literally, anytime there's something I want to change in my life, I will start a micro task. And it is the fastest way to, again, to build that habit, and to break any other habits that you're trying to break at the same time.
I totally agree with you. When I do emails, I stack them up so I can feel a sense of accomplishment as opposed to going one right after the other. And I say,
Right,
oh, I put together 15 emails. I put together this proposal, all of these things, and I feel like I've accomplished something where some people feel they don't accomplish anything and are
right.
frustrated by it. In your experience, what are specific techniques or practices that you have found to be most effective for increasing self-leadership and personal accountability in yourself and others?
Um, yeah, it's a great question. It's really comes down to being in the driver's seat, right? And so looking at, and this is all things we were talking about before we jumped on and everything as well. Again, circumstances, life, situation, challenges, frustrations, they're going to happen. Are you going to let them happen around you? Or are you going to do whatever is in your power to move through them, make the best out of it, and go forward? It's when you tap into that, I don't have control over everything, but I have control over how I respond to it, how I move forward with it, and what I decide to use from this situation. That's when you really start to realize, oh, I'm leading the charge, right? And so it's a combination of not falling into victim mentality. Things are happening to you. And having faith in yourself that there's something you can do about it. You can press forward. You can take the driver's seat. You may not be able to vastly turn the situation around, but you can control how you respond to it emotionally. You can control whether your perspective is, I'm going to learn from this. What can I learn from this? How can I grow and make sure I'm never in this situation again, right? As much as possible. So it's really about that inner work and that perspective of, I may not feel great at the moment with what's going on, but I'm going to sit in the driver's seat. We're going to drive through this mud. And I'm going to pick up some friends along the way to support me, but I'm going to stay in the driver's seat. So it's about not giving up that control, not relying on everyone else, but asking for help, right? Not relying on other people to drive you, to direct you. You're in that driver's seat, but building a team around you that supports and helps and guides while you stay focused on driving forward towards that goal. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. What strategies do you suggest for leaders to foster an environment of open communication, which it sounds like your boss has, and vulnerability, allowing team members to share their thoughts and concerns without fear of repercussion?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really as simple as, number one, saying it and meaning it, right? There's a difference. There's a difference between lip service and telling employees that, hey, I want to foster open communication. Come to me with your ideas. Come to me with solutions for problems that we're facing. Um, there's one thing if you say it and you react poorly when they actually do it, or you don't
Yeah.
listen at all, right? Then that was, a valueless gesture, right? It was just lip service. So make sure you actually mean it. Clarify what you're looking for. Because I get it. Like, it's funny. I was actually talking to someone that is dealing with some kind of management issues in a retail environment last week. And I was like, oh, I've so been there. And she was telling me, like, what do I need to do differently? Because all of my employees are coming to me with all of their problems, and I've tried to explain to them, I need you to come. I'm so busy and I want to solve these, but I trust you to come up with ideas for solutions. So I need you to come to me with some solutions, not just the problems, because that will save us all time, and it will help. A, it'll help them to know that they can trust themselves to solve some of these problems, and makes her job a little bit easier. And I said, so what happens when they're coming? You've had this conversation, you've openly communicated to them, I trust you, I believe in you to come up with solutions, and I will listen to them, and we will help make sure it's the right solution. But what happens when they come to you with just the problem and no solution? Are you still solving it? She's like, "Mm." And I'm like, yeah, I've been there, trust me. So you have to have that open conversation of, look, I'm not trying to be difficult, but I trust you. I value your opinion. I believe that you are capable of coming up with solutions. It's more time effective for you to do that thought work before you come to me. So it's like that in all things, right? It's having that open dialogue, that self-reflection of, oh, I'm not making this any easier because I'm falling into the old pattern of just solving the problem for them. But
Mm.
having that open dialogue, and I always say, especially to newer leaders, make sure you give a, this is always my strategy. Again, like I said before, I've had situations where I don't know if it's my voice, how I carry myself, but I've had people who have stated they were intimidated by me in the workplace. So that is never my intention. And so I always have a blanket statement anytime I've taken on a new team, a new client. Like, look, I tend to be a very direct person, especially when we're going, and we're solving problems. So if I ever come across in a negative way, or something rubs you the wrong way with how I've said something, like, please let me know, because that is not my intention. I will fix it. I will learn how to communicate with you so that that doesn't happen. I think that's a really valuable conversation for leaders to have, to make sure you're fostering that open communication. Because if you don't know someone's taking you the wrong way, you might be wondering, well, why aren't they coming to me with these ideas and solutions, or why aren't they talking more
They're
openly
not
with
trusting
me?
you,
Because they're
right?
not trusting you, and they don't know in your heart, this is how I'm trying to come across. So if I sound different to you, please let me know. I will fix it. I think that's the key, is kind of having that humility to say, like, I'm not perfect, and if I come across the wrong way to you, I will fix it. And I want to hear your feedback. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. In your experience, what specific strategies or techniques have you found most effective in combating, this is important, impatience, especially in high pressure situations at work or in personal life? Mistakes are made here.
Oh, yeah. Honestly, I think the number one solution is to breathe. It really is. Because like I was saying before, there's a physiological response to how you're feeling. And when you're feeling impatient, I don't know if you remember the cartoon image that's in that chapter about impatience. The visual gets me every time. Your facial expressions are going to line up with your emotions more times than not. Some people hide it better than others, but more times than not. And if you're feeling impatient, look in the mirror. Think about how your employees are going to be perceiving you. Think about how your communication is going to come across. Are you going to get the most cooperation with people when your tone is curt and clipped and your face is not looking particularly friendly, right? Probably not.
Yeah, of course.
Right? So take a minute, breathe. Really, just breathing is honestly, I think, the answer to everything. You can ask my kids, water or breathing. It's generally my answer to most most problems my kids face. But um, I think the best strategy is to breathe, try to relax your body, and really think about, okay, am I ready to make a decision, or am I ready to communicate effectively on this matter? And so kind of playing it through your mind, and it's really that self-awareness test of, am I communicating professionally, kindly, effectively when I'm feeling this way? Am I thinking about responses and actions productively? Because when you're feeling impatient, you tend to be possibly less professional or certainly less kind. Your actions and your responses and your solutions tend to be a little bit more rushed, which in my experience does not a good decision make, right? And so it's really that taking stock of, am I still rushing to a decision? Am I feeling short and curt about it? Then I need to moderate my own feelings before I communicate and before I make a decision to act. I
Well,
break that down in the book as well because it's important.
and that's why I think this next question dovetails right into it, and which is, how do you suggest individuals who struggle with self-control begin to develop it, given that self-control can be learned over time, as discussed in the chapter?
Absolutely. Again, I think it all comes down to self-awareness. So taking that time, if I was having a one-on-one, if I was mentoring someone that whether they realized it individually or we realized it together, that they were struggling with self-control, the first thing that I would recommend is a micro task of at least 15 minutes a day of self-reflection. This is their self-awareness time. Whatever that means to them, whatever connects them most internally. For me, I like to do relaxing yoga when I meditate. It helps my brain to stay focused. It helps my brain to quiet. Maybe they need to sit, find the surrounding that quiets the external for them, and really focus on self-awareness and not from a negative point. It's okay to identify things of, yeah, I acted out of, wasn't really in control of my emotions or reactions in that moment. It's okay to acknowledge those things. It's not okay to beat yourself up over them. The idea is the awareness, and okay, what could I have done differently? How could I have handled that better? What do I need to do in the moment? Again, breathe, take stock, identify, if I made this decision right this minute, would I regret that decision 15, 20 minutes from now when I'm calmed down, right? And so having, you mix the micro task in, it develops a positive habit that helps with discipline, which is key for self-control, and you mix in the self-awareness aspect and learning to regulate internally, that shifts a lot of things around, and really awakens a, like, oh, I do have the ability to control a lot more than I realized. I don't have to fly off the handle. I can pause. No one, Earth is going to shatter. Stars are going
Right.
to fall out of the sky. If I take a moment to pause and breathe and recenter myself before I make a decision.
Isn't that why first responders always tell people, just take a
Yeah.
breath, just, relax a little, you'll get through this. In the context of entrepreneurship, you highlighted, which the facts bear itself out all the time, that 90% of startups fail. How do you believe aspiring entrepreneurs can cultivate resilience and maintain motivation after facing repeated failures or setbacks in their ventures. And I've experienced exactly this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mixture of one, making sure you have a growth mindset, taking stock of the times that you have failed. Again, failure is a wonderful opportunity to learn. If you just leave it there behind you and don't take anything from it, it's a wasted opportunity, right? So, what can I learn from that? I think the biggest key for entrepreneurs, especially when they've had failures in the past, is to really, really, really moderate their fear response. Because, I've seen it in action throughout my career where when a company, especially when you're talking about an entrepreneur, you're talking about a startup, when, you know, everything is fairly critical in those early stages, right? Depending on, how much funding you've gotten. A lot of companies are self-funded to start, bootstrapped, right?
Right, of
Um,
course.
when you operate out of fear because of those past failures or because of things you don't know, you tend to make poor decisions. You tend to not bet on yourself, or you hold back and you limit the possible results that you can get. So you have to balance out that learning from the failure, having faith in what you're doing. And if you're struggling with that, making sure you've dotted your I's and you've crossed your T's. Okay, we have product market fit, right? Going through all of those steps, all the things that are required to make whatever the business is successful, and having faith in that, not operating out of fear with clenched fists because you're only going to hold yourself back. So it's really that combination of learning from those failures and learning not to fear it repeating itself. Because if you've learned from it, you're not going to repeat it, right?
So here's the last question. In your experience, how do you balance the need for persistence with the wisdom to recognize when a particular pursuit might not be worth continuing? And I teach this in classes, evaluating opportunities and not necessarily going forward, that not going forward may have been a success for you. Are there specific indicators you look at for help when you decide to pivot versus when you press on?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me and for most of us, and again, this may seem fluffy to some, but I think it comes down to fulfillment. You can persist all you want because you think it's the thing to do or it's the path that you've been on. But if it's no longer something that gives you a sense of fulfillment, it's probably time to pivot, right? I think as human beings, we spend such a huge chunk of our time at work. And or, again, whatever the goal may be, but there we spend so much time in our career, in our profession, whatever it may be for people, that shouldn't it be fulfilling for us? Shouldn't it be something that we get something out of at the end of the day, that we feel good about the work that we're doing? So that's how I look at it. There are going to be challenges no matter what you are pursuing. That's just the fact of life, and it's a great opportunity for us to learn, for us to grow, to pivot, etc. But when you take stock of the thing that you're going after, and it's challenge after challenge after challenge, and you're really pulling out every ounce of persistence and discipline that you have to keep on that path, it's really an opportune time to take stock of, am I fulfilled? Do I see the purpose? And is this tapping into my deeper why of what I value in life and what I value in my efforts? Do I see the ripple effects? And if you can't respond in the affirmative to those things, then I think that's an indicator that it's time to pivot with planning, right? And preparation. But that's kind of where I draw the line.
I agree with you. Mandy, it was a super fast hour.
It
Thank you
was.
so much for taking the time to speak with us. And we'll look forward to the next book after this one.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Mark.
My pleasure. Everyone have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you next week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.